Hello, everyone. I'm Rick Becker, host of the Irish Baseball Podcast, joined today by Keith Carney from the Commodore John Barry branch of the AOH. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, I want to start this conversation by actually setting a scene. And somebody is walking to Independence Hall. They just parked and they have a tour scheduled and they're in Philadelphia walking to Independence Hall. And as they approach the entrance for their tour, they see a statue. And you're thinking, this is Independence Hall in Philadelphia. This statue could be George Washington, it could be Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, any one of these incredible figures from American history could be commemorated here. But it's not. It is Commodore John Barry, and he is an Irish born huge figure in the American Revolution. So, why don't you talk about John Barry himself?
Well, John Barry came to the United States as a cabin boy from Wexford, Ireland. He was um, on a ship with his uncle, who was a merchant out of Wexford, and came to the United States as a young lad and worked his way up in the early colonial times, which was very difficult for an Irish Catholic, of course, to do. But he was a dominant figure both in his personality, while he was somewhat of a quiet man, but in his personality and in his stature, he was 6'4", grew to that size. So he was probably one of the only people who could look George Washington into the eye, into his eyes at the time. But he became a very successful merchantman in Philadelphia, and went on to his accolades in the constitutional or the uh, Navy of the American Revolution, Continental Navy, and then on to success with the United States Navy.
Incredible. So, he got his commission directly from George Washington. And you said that he's one of the only people who could look George Washington in the eye. And they say that George Washington's height played a big part in why he was able to be such a great leader because he sort of commanded that attention. So, Barry, similar in that. He came over from Ireland, like you said, not having the best chance to move up in society, but he did it because of his acumen. How did he end up coming in contact with General Washington in the first place?
Well, much of the congressional and the early revolution started in Philadelphia. It was one of the major cities, the major ports. So with the revolution afoot, he was in the thick of it. And certainly as an Irishman, he was one who wanted independence from Great Britain. So he made sure that that was going to happen, or either that or die in the fight trying. So he was, as a lot of early uh, colonial men in our nation's history were of Irish descent, and certainly helped in that great fight that we had in the 1770s against Great Britain.
And your branch of the AOH is doing something extraordinary to make sure to keep his legacy alive. First of all, your branch is named after John Barry, but you did something in 2025 to sort of make sure that this memory, this legacy stays.
Yeah, we I, along with some other members of my division and AOH nationally, as well as the Ladies Ancient Order of Hibernians, teamed up to set up a museum display on board the battleship New Jersey. Now, this came about. I and a former colleague of mine, great man Jack O'Brien, had worked on building the Barry Memorial at Annapolis, which took us about 15 years to do. Um, but we finally got that done. Probably, I think we're on our 10th or 12th year anniversary of getting that installed. I had been in discussions with Jack and members of the Navy. They're starting a new museum in Washington, a Navy museum that's going to be about a $500 million project. It had been, they wanted an area dedicated to Commodore Barry and the early Navy. And they came to Jack and myself to have that discussion. Uh, we've had a number of meetings about setting up an area to pay tribute to Barry in that new museum. Um, with the change of administration here in Washington, some of the efforts were put on hold. And I got a call from the Battleship New Jersey that they would like us to put on a display on board the battleship as part of their commemoration and the 250th anniversary of the Navy, which took place in October. So we had about less than 2 months to plan. And I teamed up with a great historian, Tim McGrath, who wrote the book on Barry, uh, and uh, and my fellow Commodore John Barry members here in Washington, and we designed a display that has been on board the ship since the 1st of October. So it's all about it educating the the Navy for one, because the Navy has there's still people in the Navy who don't understand who Commodore John Barry is, but also the public. And I think we had probably 20,000 visitors go through the ship in the last 3 months. So we were very happy with the turnout. But it's a great display, and if you haven't had a chance, go on board the battleship New Jersey in Camden, New Jersey, and it's a great exhibit.
So there are three men who are kind of given the title of the father of the American Navy. One of them, of course, being John Barry. The other one is John Paul Jones, who is a Scottish immigrant. And then, of course, John Adams, who was president for the founding of the Navy, who is as Anglican as any man has ever been, probably. So I think that even that moniker that has been given to the three of those men just shows how diverse the founding of the United States was. That you have an Irish immigrant, you have a Scottish immigrant, and then you have somebody who was accused of being a monarchist while he was in office and while he was serving. So it shows that not only were there different types of people fighting in the American Revolution, it also shows that the Irish didn't just come over during the potato famine. That is where a lot of Irish American history starts when you're talking about Irish immigration,
Mhm.
but that's just not true. The Irish were here from the very beginning, playing a major role in the United States. So if you could talk about that a little bit, not just John Barry himself, but how the Irish played a role in the Revolution and before that.
Yeah, there are a lot of great Irish figures that played in. A number of them, interestingly, were aide-de-camps to General Washington. I think he liked the Irish spirit in fighting the British. One of them was Colonel John Fitzgerald, who was in Alexandria, Virginia, a Scottish town. Another merchantman who rose through the ranks of society in Alexandria to become one of the first mayors of Alexandria as an Irish Catholic. He started the Catholic Church, the first Catholic church in the state of Virginia, in Alexandria, St. Mary's, and had a long list of accolades. But he was an aide de camp. Another important and other Philadelphian was Stephen Moylan. And Moylan was the first, he was an aide de camp. His brother was also an aide de camp to George Washington. He, another brother was a bishop, a Catholic bishop in Ireland at the time. So came from a very strong family from Cork. And he is buried in St. Mary's Cemetery right next to Commodore John Barry. But Moylan was one who coined the phrase the United States of America. He coined that term about 6 months before the Declaration of Independence was formed. So he was instrumental, and Washington trusted the Irish and certainly made sure that on St. Patrick's Day, the Irish could have their due. And even I believe in Valley Forge, there was a great celebration. Washington made sure that that would happen. So good on them as Irishmen to pick up the fight.
You mentioned St. Mary's Roman Catholic Church in Philadelphia, which is where John Barry is buried. And that church has a lot of significance in the American Revolution. For example, when we just talk about the ideals of the country and we talk about freedom of religion, because Pennsylvania was founded by William Penn, who was a Quaker, he always had the rule that there would be religious freedom in Pennsylvania. And he got exceptions made that didn't happen anywhere else in the British Empire. And at one point, St. Mary's Catholic Church in Philadelphia was the only Catholic church in the British Empire because William Penn had stated that there would be religious freedom in his colony. And then during the Revolution, as a way to show solidarity with France and with Spain, who provided so much help, the Continental Congress would go to Mass at St. Mary's to sort of try to show their respect for Catholicism, because obviously this was a country being founded by a lot of Protestants from England or of English descent, but
Mhm.
they wanted to show the French and the Spanish that they had respect for their religion and that there would be religious freedom in this new country. Barry, you mentioned, was a Catholic, correct?
Yes.
Did that influence his desire to fight in the revolution because he thought that maybe there would be more religious freedom for people like him in the United States if they were able to break away from Great Britain?
Yeah, Barry grew up in the time in Ireland called the penal times, which were the penal laws that were passed by the British did not allow practice of the Catholic faith. It also didn't allow Catholics to own land um, or businesses. So that's one of the reasons he left. And a lot of Irish left Ireland at the time to come for the opportunity to be able to start businesses, to be able to start own land and build their own properties as they saw fit. And that was one of the freedoms that was allowed here and a big draw for the Irish who had been under the British thumb for so many years.
Excellent. So, what are some of Barry's successes in the Navy?
Well, Barry was very successful in the Continental Navy. His merchant ship the Black Prince was one of the first commissioned ships given to the Continental Navy. That was actually taken over by, it was captained by John Paul Jones. And then Barry went on to, he captured the first British ship, had a number of very successful runs against the British. Um, there were some controversies because he would scuttle ships, that if he was about to lose them, a big part of the war effort was the prize. Once you captured a ship, is what was on the ship you were reimbursed for. So that's one of the ways that the Navy was paying its crews, was based upon what types of ships they would commandeer. So there was some financial incentive as well as the victory. And Barry was very acute in the especially around the Delaware Bay and the waters of Philadelphia and the Delaware River. So he was a great fighter against the British in that area.
And he came over from County Wexford in Ireland because in the American colonies, the merchant ships were in need of experienced sailors. Was he a successful business person before the start of the revolution? Did he come over here? Obviously, like so many people, he didn't come over here to fight a revolution. He came over here for work. He came over here because there was a need for his services. Was he successful business wise before the start of the revolution, or did he come over here and get wrapped up in it right away?
No, he was young. He was only 14 when he departed. So he worked his way up, but he was, I think, the youngest merchant captain in the colonies. So people saw his value, and I think he was pretty instrumental on trade to China. He had done a number of trips, which was a pretty significant amount of time to leave the United States or in the colonies at the time. So he was a very successful merchant, um, and grew that into his certain desire to make sure that he remained a successful merchant as time went on. Unfortunately, he just stayed in the Navy and didn't get back to the merchant side as much as he did as a fighter.
If you would have asked people at the time, would he have been a much more prominent figure than he has been over the past 250 years as some of his story has been forgotten to time?
Yeah, he was, even though the Americans won the revolution, the history was still written by the British in this country. And the British wanted their hero. And I don't want to take anything away from John Paul Jones. He was a great Navyman. He was a great captain, was extremely successful in the Continental Navy. But John Barry continued on. He didn't, John Barry stayed in America. Uh, uh, John Paul Jones left and became a mercenary in France and was fighting there. So that's one of the reasons why Barry became commission number one in the United States Navy, because he was the most successful captain. But he was well known in uh, in Philadelphia, again from his success in both the merchant side as well as the colonial navy, but the Continental Navy. But he was also a very big man and involved with during the Constitutional Convention. Interesting story. He there were members who did not want to ratify the Constitution, and they, in protest, stayed away from the Congress so there wouldn't be a quorum. So Barry was sent out, now an imposing man of 6'4", and literally dragged these individuals down the streets of Philadelphia and brought them back to the Continental Congress so that they would have a quorum and be able to vote. I think it was brought up on charges of assault, and he weaseled his way out of those, but he didn't have too many favor from the people that he was dragging back. So, but certainly well known in Philadelphia. One of the important things that I like to point out, there's been a lot of consternation in this country about the number of slave owners that were in the early colonials and the founding fathers. John Barry never owned slaves. He was a unique individual in that sense, as a prominent businessman. He never took to the slave trade. I don't know that. I know there's some pretty extensive papers, writings that Villanova has on his letters back and forth to his family in Ireland, but there was never any mention of or any records of slave ownership. So I always found that interesting about the man. He was above that.
Do you think that might have had anything to do with coming from a place like Ireland where there wasn't necessarily slavery, but the landlord system had people working for free under wealthier people? Do you think that that experience might have informed him when it came to slavery? Obviously, we're just guessing at this point
Yeah.
because we can't go back 250 years and ask him what he thought. But in your opinion, would that have informed his views on slavery?
I think so. It was a feudal system that the British were running in Ireland. So, essentially, and I think the uh, Frederick Douglass said famously when he went over, he was a freed slave who self-educated and went to Ireland to study during the Great Hunger. And he was a big fan of Daniel O'Connell's in Ireland. So, but his famous quote was that the Irish in Ireland were treated worse than slaves in America. And that was true. And unfortunately, it was the system that the Irish were subjected to. And I think Barry certainly took that into consideration.
And of course, as we mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, you are from the Commodore John Barry division of the AOH. And as we celebrate the 250th anniversary of the country, and organizations like yours, divisions like yours, are doing things to preserve the Irish immigrant and Irish American impact on the country, why don't you talk a little bit about why you're proud to be a member of the AOH and what you think it might offer some of our members and people who are listening to this podcast to be a member of the AOH and continue to celebrate that Irish heritage?
Well, it's important to the AOH was formed in the United States in 1836. It's a fraternal organization that was set up to help Irish immigrants with jobs and housing and aid and helping the Irish settle. Um, Now the AOH is a philanthropic organization based around the Irish Catholic community. And we're very proud of our heritage. We're very proud of our culture. And we like to celebrate our history is one of the major pillars of what we do on a regular basis as an organization. And the 250th anniversary, we feel it's important to make sure that the legacy of the Irish coming to America is not lost. That it's important. There were a lot of Scotch Irish. There were a lot of Catholic Irish that came to the United States, and they were a huge impact on forming the early days of this country, but in contributing, for years and years. Half of the United States presidents, 24 of the 48, are of Irish descent. And that's a pretty big number. And we want to make sure that people realize the importance of the Irish contribution in the forming of this country, and we want to promote that. And I'm on two committees: AOH 250, which is celebrating mostly the Irish Catholic side, excuse me, and then also on the committee called Irish America 250, and they have a website. You can go to the AOH.com website and the IrishAmerica250.org website to find out about celebrations. There'll be one in Philadelphia on the 14th of January to honor Stephen Moylan. And then the plan is in February, we're all getting involved together to help paint President's Day green. And the AOH will be having a very large mass at St. Matthew's Cathedral here in Washington to celebrate President's Day. St. Matthew's is where John F. Kennedy had his funeral, and there's so there's a great pull for us to go there as the first Irish Catholic to serve as the President of the United States. He was also a member of the AOH, so we feel that it's important to honor him, and we'll be having ceremonies at Arlington Cemetery to lay a wreath at the Eternal Flame, as well as having Mass that day. So we want to celebrate this, and we want Irish Americans from all over the country, no matter what your background, what your affiliations are, to join in and recognize the importance of the Irish.
You mentioned IrishAmerica250.org. We actually did an interview with Hillary Byrne about
Mm-hmm.
that project. So anybody who is listening to this can go back and check out that interview with Hillary Byrne for more details on IrishAmerica250.org. One of our objectives here at the Irish American Baseball Society is not just to talk about baseball, obviously, but we have Irish language classes, and we try to have history as much as possible and talk about those things because I do think it is important. The more some of us get away from whoever was the first one to come over from Ireland, right? The further we get, the more we do get Americanized.
Yeah,
And I think it's important to make sure that we are preserving these cultures because it's a part of who you are as a person, where your ancestors began.
absolutely. And my hat's off to my baseball cap is off to uh, um, your organization, and I'm a proud member. And I look back at my own history, and I had a cousin uh, whose name was John Handsome Jack Carney, who played for the Washington Nationals, played first base for the Washington Nationals in 1889. So
Oh, wow.
he was the first generation. So my family came over on a coffin ship We were escorted out of Ireland in 1847. And his father was a young lad on that coffin ship, survived, and Handsome Jack became a professional baseball player. I think it was all about the knowledge of the bat and the ball from hurling that probably prompted a lot of young Irish Americans to join in baseball. And it's a great tradition. He would have played. He also played in Cincinnati and a few other cities, but for actually a professional baseball player in 1889. It was a sport that took hold pretty early in our country's history.
Wow, I really appreciate you sharing that story. That is amazing. Just one other thing I want to mention before we go. You talked about Frederick Douglass and his trip to Ireland, which influenced him so much in the abolitionist movement. And when we talk about preserving the Irish culture, I think one of the things that I have loved in my research thus far for the 250th anniversary of the country is the more that I study the Irish American impact, the Irish immigrant impact on the United States, the more I find it has its toe in other cultures. There is the influence on somebody like Frederick Douglass and abolition. There are the Irish Catholic priests who march with Martin Luther King in the civil rights movement. You have John Barry, who refused to own slaves, even at a time when most men of his stature did own slaves. And you have labor organizers who, yes, a lot of their workers were Irish immigrants, Irish Americans, but they were organizing everyone in the factory or everyone in
Yeah.
the coal mine. So while we're celebrating our heritage, we're not doing it to the exclusion of other people. And actually, you end up finding a lot of solidarity with other people, Italian immigrants, a lot of different immigrants, a lot of different working people, because Irish immigrants and Irish Americans were in working class jobs for a lot of our history. So I think that's an important thing to state as well as we celebrate the impact the Irish have had on the 250 years of the United States. Keith Carney, thank you so much for being a part of this show. I appreciate you being here.
Rick, it's been a pleasure.